Move it down there.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. I work from home taking care of my dog and sometimes actually do some work.
Oh, okay.
But it's putting the name to the face that
I couldn't differentiate between the faces. I couldn't even match faces. So it was like this whole thing to be able to know if you could pick out facial features. Like, oh, well, that explains a lot about my life. Funny, he was writing names down, huh? He was writing names down.
get any traffic coming here?
Hmm?
Which way did you come? Did you get any traffic coming? There was like a backup on the,
Yeah, a little bit over by,
I don't know if it was like a train or something.
McCrim.
I've never been early. I'm
Do you
usually
walk
like the
here?
2 minutes
Do
before.
you walk here or what do you do?
No, I drive, but usually I walk everywhere else.
Yeah, I've actually seen you walking before.
I'm all over the place.
Morrisville.
My backpack.
So assuming that Kristen does not come, you will be a voting member.
Oh, wow.
I let you go crazy over the signs. Try to control yourself as the big
Signs is the least of my problems.
You haven't heard from her?
But I mean, I'm going to wait just a minute or two just because there was a little bit. Oh, she will not be here. Okay. Okay. Then I think I will go ahead. I'd like to call to order the March meeting of the Morrisville Planning and Zoning Board. If you will join me for the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Do we have any changes to the agenda? I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
I move to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
All in favor? Aye. And Member Bain will be a voting member tonight, just for the record. And the planning director has a couple of introductions to make before we proceed.
Thank you, Chairman. Before we got too far into the meeting, I did want to introduce a couple new staff to the Planning and Zoning Board who are here this evening. So we have with us our new Economic Development Director, Tiffany McNeil. So Tiffany. Tiffany's been with us for a few months now, our first Economic Director for Morrisville. So very exciting, and just wanted to introduce her to all of you. And then also want to take an opportunity to introduce Kimberly Jones. Kimberly Jones is our Development Services Coordinator. She came to us from inspections after Amy retired. And she is here tonight to kind of learn a little bit more about the PZB and also get a little training so we have backup for your PZB secretary position if ever needed. So just wanted to make those two introductions so you weren't looking around the room wondering who people were, but want to thank both of them for being here this evening.
Thank you and welcome. Any changes to the minutes from the last meeting? No? I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Carries unanimously. Thank you. Do we have any public comment not having to do with the two items? All right, seeing none, I will move ahead to number 7A.
Good evening, board members. I'm May Golden, Planner 1 for the town of Morrisville. And tonight I have for you a master sign plan for the Pathway Triangle campus, identified by number 2025-30. As you can see here, here's an area. Our UDO requires a maximum of 32 square feet, so that's about a 10 square foot increase. So also as a reminder, the master sign plan allows the applicant to propose their own dimension.
So any comments from the board? Let's start with Rick.
No.
It was good detail. It was a good presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, that was good, yeah. Nice and clear. So that being said, is there a motion to approve or deny this sign plan?
Make a motion, approve.
We have a second. We have 2 seconds. You get one of those? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, board.
All right, we can move on to 7B. We have extra microphones up here.
Microphones will be the death of me.
I heard that. Yeah. Must be working now.
Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, hopefully the mic will cooperate. Good evening, Chairman and Board. My name is Brittany Johnson. I'm Planning Manager with the Planning Department. It is my pleasure to bring before you all tonight proposed UDO text amendments related to the Business Activity Center zoning district. Presentation overview. The proposed text amendments are intended to provide additional flexibility to the business activity center zoning district through the addition of light manufacturing as a permitted use. These changes are desired to further innovation and economic development. The proposed text amendments also introduce data center as a new use by special use permit only. A little background on this item. On January 7th, a stakeholder engagement meeting was held that consisted of our property owners in this area, developers, and the Wake County Economic Development. Staff provided a brief history of the BAC zoning district, as well as our stakeholders provided feedback concerning market evolution. On January 26th, there was our town council retreat. Staff provided an economic development update. Staff also provided an overview of the proposed changes to the BAC zoning district, and town council provided feedback concerning the proposed changes. Lastly, an additional stakeholder engagement meeting was held on February 18th. Staff provided an overview of the proposed text amendments and received feedback concerning those text amendments. Now to our proposed UDO amendments. The first, as I stated, would be to add light manufacturing as a permitted use in our BAC zoning district. Currently, light manufacturing is only permitted in industrial management. Our upcoming slides will also detail the proposed alterations to the definition of light manufacturing and outline the proposed use-specific standards. So a little on our use-specific standards. This would be altering or creating section 4.2.5 F2C in our principal use-specific standards. With this, they are the first, that all light manufacturing uses in the BAC zoning district are prohibited from fronting major and minor thoroughfares as identified in the comprehensive transportation plan, unless in compliance with subsection A. I will note that McCrimmon Corridor is listed as a major thoroughfare. Subsection A reads, if light manufacturing uses front on major or minor thoroughfares, all architectural standards of section 5.9 shall apply. Secondly, we have outdoor storage is prohibited. Third, to the maximum extent practical, structures shall be oriented so that loading areas and service source courtyards are not visible from residential developments or existing planned or future right-of-way. Also, section 3.8.4C5 shall also apply. All off-street loading and service areas must be screened per 5.13.2. I did want to provide a little additional information on that. So with that, that just is to minimize and mitigate any sort of visual impacts of these higher intensity uses. Number 4, if deemed necessary by the planning director, applications for a building permit shall include written clarification by a professional engineer or licensed architect to understand that any sort of noise generated by the use will not be heard outside of the use. And so to provide a little bit more clarity on that as well, again, all noise generated by the use has to be completely contained within the building. However, if they have any sort of ground-mounted equipment or roof-mounted equipment, that noise will be governed by our noise ordinance. Subsection 5, a roof well or parapet wall is required to screen all roof-mounted equipment as not to be visible from immediate ground level or ground level of adjacent properties. Again, this will help us to be more proactive instead of reactive so that we can plan for any sort of roof-mounted equipment. And lastly, the last use-specific standard is number 6. Shared buffers are prohibited between industrial and residential uses in BAC zoning district. Currently, shared buffers are allowed. So if there is a property that has installed a full buffer, the adjacent property owner can install 50% of the required buffer. So we end up with 150% as opposed to 200% of the required buffer. Next, we will be altering the proposed definition of light manufacturing. So when we're looking at definitions, definitions are broken down in a couple of ways. The first So the definition is broken down in parameters. So that's first, what is the definition? What will be encompassed? The second, impacts. So we want to mitigate any sort of impacts on adjacent property owners. The third section would be any sort of examples. And then also the last section would be restrictions. So when looking at the first parameters, the alteration, it reads that the manufacturing of products or parts, and this is the new portion, that innovative technology is improved to improve existing products and to create new products. So that is the addition to that particular section. When going to our impacts, we want to, again, mitigate any sort of impacts on adjacent property owners and adjacent properties as a whole. So that there were no changes into this section. It just reads that provided all manufacturing activities are contained entirely within a building and noise, odor, smoke, heat, glare, vibration resulting from manufacturing activities are contained entirely inside the building. The third section would be our examples. So we did update a few examples just to make them a little bit more up to date, and that would be to involve any sort of computer technology, robotics, or other sorts of innovation to improve products or processes. And we also added medical devices as a listed example. The last section would be our restrictions, and in this section, it now, as data center is now listed as or proposed as a permitted use, we want to make sure that we are making it clear that data centers are not permitted as a part of light manufacturing. So it does not include data centers and uses containing light manufacturing or light industrial assembly, which require any sort of outdoor storage. So all uses must, and also town council had specific concerns concerning toxic runoff and things of that nature. So we wanted the definition to clearly state that all uses must conform with all local, state, federal environmental regulations. So that is also added into that definition. Next, we'll be moving on to data center. Data center is now proposed as a special use within BAC and our industrial management zoning designations. So again, this use does not exist in the UDL as it is today. So further on in the presentation, I will give you the definition of data center as well as give you a little bit more on special use permits. And again, that would be by special use permit only in the business activity center, zoning designation, and industrial management. So again, it would be by special use permit only. With special use permits, this is really our vehicle to make sure that we are reviewing on a case-by-case basis. As special use permits, we want to make sure that they are allowed within a particular zoning designation if the use is appropriate in that district, but because of its nature or extent, that we want to make sure that it is a good fit for the location, designs, and any sort of methods of operation. So with that, there are 7 standards. The first is that the proposed development will not materially endanger the public health and safety. 2, the proposed development will comply with all regulations and standards generally applicable in the zoning designation. 3, the proposed development will not substantially injure value of adjoining properties or public necessity. 4, the proposed development will be in harmony with the intensity, scale, and character of the development existing as a plan or planned in the surrounding area. 5, the proposed development will not cause any undue traffic congestion or create a traffic hazard. And 6, the proposed development will not generate needs for transportation, water supply, sewage disposal, fire and police protection, or similar public services that cannot be adequately handled by available infrastructure and facilities. And 7, the proposed development will be consistent with the comprehensive plan. So those are our 7 standards, and that would apply to any sort of data center use. Also, special use permits are a quasi-judicial process, so that would be heard by town council. When looking at our data center use, we want to make sure that we identify a parking standard as the use has not been defined previously. So when looking at that, when we have uses within the UDO that there isn't an established parking minimum, Therefore, we default to section 5.10.3B, and that's uses with varying vehicle parking demands. And so the way that we would part that would be one, that you have a parking standard that's most similar to a use that is already defined. Two, that we would establish a parking minimum per the National Parking Association or the American Planning Association. Or three, we would provide a parking study, and that's by our Institute of Traffic Engineers. So that is the proposed parking standard for this use. Lastly, we have the definition of the use data center. It is a building that houses a group of network server computers in one physical location to centralize the storage, management, and dissemination of data and information pertaining to a particular business or body of knowledge. A data center facility typically includes mechanical and electrical systems, redundant or backup power storage, redundant data communications, environmental controls, cooling centers, fire suppression systems, and enhanced security features. So we'll move on to a few questions from PZB. Do you all have any questions regarding the information I've shared? I know it's a lot, so.
Thank you. Yeah, let's, I guess, any questions? Go back to Rick again.
No, I mean, I hope this is in line with something coming in, but it's a lot of power demand. So, with the construction, with all the stuff with sub-centers and everything, so Duke will be able to provide, because these will eat up a lot of energy.
Are you specifically referring to light manufacturing or data centers?
Data centers.
That is a concern. And so looking at the 7 use-specific standards, or 7 special use permit standards, number 6 would address that. It's to make sure that there are there's adequate infrastructure and facilities, and that would be power included into that. So that's why it's by special use permit only.
Okay, thank you.
Chris?
I think my questions were around the same item. Is there a size limit to the data center, or are you thinking this is small to support the business that's attached to it, or this is a freestanding data center business?
Yeah, it has been identified as freestanding. So there were we've done a lot of industry research. There really isn't a recognized, this is a small, medium, or large. We did contemplate if there is a minor that would be by right, and then a major by a certain size that would be major and it would need a special use permit. However, looking at the need and the impact on infrastructure, I think regardless of size, it would need a special use permit, and that will help us evaluate on that case-by-case basis, because that information would have to be disclosed prior to the special use permit hearing.
Can I ask one more question?
You can ask all the questions you have.
Just out of curiosity, when people build, we ask them to put solar for the recreation room, and when they build, we ask them to fund roads and to fund parks. Will there be any requirements for them to gift towards energy, whether it's solar panels, whether it's some other type of generation or something for the city? Just something you might want to consider, because it seems to align with other types of businesses.
Yeah, and I think that will be handled as well through our special use permit process. So town council will be able to evaluate exactly what is the need for infrastructure, exactly how will that have an impact on our current infrastructure, and then also ask the developer or owner to put forth any sort of conditions and things that would help mitigate those impacts.
Thank you. That's all I had.
Ken? No questions. Sure. So, all right, I had a couple. So, I mean, obviously the kind of light manufacturing we're talking about are things like pharma and, that kind of stuff. And also with the data centers, both of those are going to need to have, as you talked about, backup power, consistent power. You don't want your process to go down in the middle of the night. So we're talking about no storage and everything, but like generators are going to have to be mounted outside. The generators will need to be mounted outside. And so, they typically have to run for like some period of time every week. It's called exercising. I mean, I know some of these are could potentially be close to some of the apartments that are been over there. So I mean, are we going to have any restrictions? You're saying the noise ordinance applies, but like when that generator's fire up and it's generally on Sunday morning at like 10 o'clock is what most people program them to do. I mean, I can see how there could be a conflict there. So I don't know if we need to be a little bit more honed in on like some specific language about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, we did contemplate that as well. However, with any sort of recognized typical equipment that would be ground mounted or roof mounted, that is what the noise ordinance is there to mitigate. With that, that would, if there were a complaint, then that would become a code enforcement issue.
Right,
And that
but
is
once
our,
the equipment is in and then stopping after a complaint, I mean, it feels like if we could deal with this up front, they could design the system right away to meet that rather than, oops, it's a little loud. And I don't know. I just feel like it's always better to deal with these things up front with an engineering solution as much as possible rather than waiting for somebody to complain about it, I would think. But of course, they're in the airport overlay district too. So, I mean, I guess maybe they're used to noise, but you know, when the generator fires up, and especially some of these larger, if you're talking about something to back up a facility that is doing this, even like say manufacturing, that's quite loud.
true, and this is, the majority of this would be within the airport overlay B. And with that, any sort of residential uses have to make sure they have sound attenuation to, I think, 45 decibels. So.
And then, and the question about parking, so it wasn't totally clear how much was going to be required. I mean, I think generally data centers don't need a lot of parking. You've got very limited people. So, I mean, like a parking minimum, this would be like one of the few places I think we could easily do away with a parking minimum, but I don't know. Like I saw the couple that, what was the sort of final number that you came to there?
So we did not come to a
Okay.
final number. And so anywhere within the UDO where there is a use where there isn't a recognized minimum that we have established, then that user can look at the American Planning Association or ITE and say, well, in this area or in these cases, this is the general parking demand for a use similar to this. And then therefore we would set that study and review the study, and from there, establish a minimum. But it's likely that they won't need.
Right, because I mean, I saw that one of those said 1 per 1,000. I was thinking even 1 per 1,000 would be crazy for a data center. I mean, yeah. Any other questions from?
Just one
Got
more.
one more? Sure.
Just one more.
We rely on you to ask these questions. So
I don't have
mean,
good questions on this. This is something I'm not familiar with. But I do know some of the electricity programs people have in town is if the demand is high, they will automatically push their temperature down or their air conditioning will change. And I think people would have that question, not just me, that this wouldn't somehow come into play, that this is high usage and the demand for the residents would suddenly automatically bump their thermostat down a few degrees to compensate at peak hours. So I'm assuming you'll look into that, but I know that would be a question for anybody that has that program.
Okay. I don't have an answer for that in this form.
That's okay. I just wanted to bring that up because I know many people use that program.
So any other questions? If not,
I just have one quick one, and not to tear away from the answer today, but on your backup generation with data centers, because they run 24/7, it's not going to be, it's going to be used strictly for backup in case something fails in the unit to keep them running, I take it. And it's not going to be used necessarily for peak shaving for their unit, to use the backup instead of the conventional electricity. That's just a question if you could ask if and when that person comes in or looking at the area.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that because that has been incorporated into our definition, that will automatically have those sorts of questions asked whenever a user comes in.
Okay, thank you.
okay. If we don't have any other questions, do we have a motion? Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry about that. So I will ask and open a public comment session for this item. Is there anyone here that would like to give a comment related to this? Okay, seeing none, then we can go ahead to the motion. Sorry.
Make the motion.
Sure.
I'd like to make a motion to approve ordinance 2025-85-0 of the Morrisville Town Council approving text amendments of the Unified Development Ordinance related to the Business Activity Center VAC zoning district.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right. Motion second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So the motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess we can move on to the planning newsletter.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. A few updates for the board this month. So in terms of new site plans and development applications that have been submitted, we do have a new site plan and construction plan application for a creek stream restoration project that is happening kind of between Church Street and the railroad, back behind the Park Townhome development, if you know where that's located. Also, we received a site and construction plan application for BP Pulse. They're proposing the development of an EV charging station at 1200 Perimeter Park Drive, and that's adjacent to the still relatively new 7-Eleven up in that area. In other news, we continue to have a number of different special projects and initiatives going on. So the town just kicked off an alternative transit study. There was a kickoff meeting with town council on February 25th, where our consultant VHB met with council to touch base on a few items. But that study is anticipated to take about 9 months. It's going to evaluate the current smart shuttle system, which has now been in operation for about 3.5 years. So time to just take another look at that, see where there might be opportunities to enhance and improve that system. Specifically, one of the things that the study is going to be looking at is if we should continue with an on-demand model or maybe go to a fixed route or a hybrid model. So again, that study has started. We anticipate public engagement kicking off here very soon. So look for those opportunities over the next 2 to 3 months. There'll be some preliminary engagement, and then there'll be engagement after we have some draft recommendations as well. So encourage all of you to look out for that and participate in that study and provide your feedback. In regard to affordable housing, we had a work session with town council on February 27th. Talked to town council about the property at 101 to 105 Church Street, which is at the corner of Church Street and Morrisville Carpenter Road. You may recall that was the site that we were looking at to potentially partner with Habitat for Humanity. The price tag on that project for 9 to 11 potential townhomes, however, was still relatively high. So we were looking at options to kind of reduce the gap and the amount of town contribution that would be needed. It looks like at this point we will likely be starting to evaluate other options, maybe doing an RFP on the site, maybe looking at plan development. Haven't completely turned away from the Habitat model yet, but we haven't been able to find any additional partners to bring down the cost of that project. Also touched base with town council at that same work session about rental assistance, received some confirmation about the framework for a rental assistance program, and we will be going out for an RFQ soon to hire someone to stand up and contract a rental assistance program for the town. Initially, that will focus on town employees and public servants, trying to start small, gain some experience, learn a little bit about a type of program that we haven't initiated in the past, and we'll go on from there. But town council committed to a 3 to 5 year pilot period for that. And then finally, a couple more items related to transportation that we are going to ask for your assistance on, ask you to communicate with your neighbors and fellow residents. But there are 2 opportunities for public comment right now related to the Aviation Parkway widening project. So A little bit of background, you may recall that project starts really back around Town Hall Drive, passes over the NC 54 and Aviation intersection, and goes almost all the way to I-40. That project entails widening the road from 2 lanes to 4 lanes, constructing a median, putting in a sidewalk on one side of the road, multi-use path on the other, and some improvements to the intersection just down the road here at NC 54 and Aviation. That project was slated in the STIP for construction to begin in fiscal year 28. Construction is proposed to be pushed off to fiscal year 30. Different reasons for that, mainly additional time needed for right-of-way acquisition and utility relocate. Design is still underway and starting on the initial schedule that was initially adopted. But we are letting residents know that that project is proposed to be pushed off. There is public comment being taken on the draft STIP now. So if that is a project that is of interest to you, would encourage you to comment on that. And similarly, in front of Campo, they're also going to be hearing what we call a TIP amendment for that beginning in April. So comments could be made to both Campo and NCDOT. If you have any additional questions about that, I'd be happy to forward on additional information to all of you.
Can I ask about the affordable housing? When town council reviewed, did they have an opportunity to see the rental houses, that presentation we saw last month? Because that was a very small footprint houses that probably are similar to Habitat. Did they have the opportunity to review that before they provided comment?
No, that project, the Hamlet development, has not made its way to town council yet. It's slated to go to them in April.
And then one other on the communicate to your neighbors. Is the intent to say you would like this to move forward sooner? Is this something that gets escalated? So certainly I have bulletin board access like other people and I can help, but what is it that would be helpful other than I'm frustrated with traffic? What would be a helpful format?
Yeah. So what the town is proposing to Campo and NCDOT, we understand that there is a reality with how much time right-of-way and utility locates are gonna take. But part of the project goes over the causeway, so that is part of the reason why that is anticipated to take that long. We are proposing and advocating that the project be broken into 2 phases and that the phase between Town Hall Drive and McCrimmon Parkway be done first. Our hope is that will allow that section at least to stay on the original schedule. That is where we have, I would argue, the most significant issues related to safety at the intersection, pedestrian safety along the roads. So we are advocating for that section to be completed first, and then for the other section to immediately follow from McCrimmon to I-40.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I guess, any other comments?
Just Michelle, just one question I have for you. Is there any new additional stops being looked at for Smart Shuttle? Me? I was just asking in regards to if there's any additional thoughts or any considerations for additional stops for the Smart Shuttle.
So I'll say potentially. While we're undertaking the study, we have recommended that we wait for the results of the study before adding additional stops. But it will depend on the model. If we stay with on demand, that has certain impacts. If we go to fixed route, then you're looking more closely at how long does that whole loop around the town take? Are you doing 1 loop? Are you doing 2 loops? And where you place stops, impacts the amount of time that it takes to do that loop. We will be doing an analysis. We do I think at this point, we're up to biannual updates with town council, where we're constantly looking at performance metrics that were established for the system, and those also include node performance. So we do know that some nodes are more popular than others, but whether we potentially remove nodes or add new nodes, we're waiting to see if the model is going to change, because that could have a significant impact on node location.
Thank you.
It sounds like a great opportunity to participate in the outreach. Anyway, I'll say welcome to the new staff members, and that is it. I guess we will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
All right, Esther, second. All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.